We said in the last episode that when Monet was looking for a place to settle, he said, "Once settled, I hope to produce masterpieces because I like the countryside very much." So today we take a look at his masterpieces, painted mostly in Giverny. All paintings are from Musée Marmottan Monet. I hope that at some point, the reason for the choice will be apparent. Let's start with this impression, Sunrise. As we learned in the last episode, this painting gave the name Impressionism. Why does sunrise or sunset always impress us? Besides it takes place in the hours normally right before or after work, thus associating and symbolizing calmness, I would say that the color itself is part of the reasons. When all the cool colors are taken away by the soft, warm color, our hearts warm up with it, don't you think? On top of that, photographers would especially agree with me that those warm colors are fleeting, as shooting in those hours are always a race against time, almost like shooting sports. If you're not ready before things take place, you probably will miss the shot. I've seen photographers camping out in the same spot for 3 months trying to capture a shot, or spending their whole lives taking pictures in a very limited geographical area, so they know where and when. When Louis Leroy, the critic, made his famous derogatory comment about this painting, as well as others on display, that they were just impressions, nothing more, I'm sure he didn't realize that, to eternity, people would mention his name derogatorily. This episode is devoted to this nothing more, when Monet made a dedicated effort to capture the color or the light in those fleeting moments. Besides the impressions of the paintings, we'll also look at the brushstroke details to see how Monet accomplished the impressions. This is Monet's atmospheric perspective. Look at the rooftop. Without it, the painting would lose a lot of depth. Ah, the tulip field. See that yellow impasto almost dripping? Tulips are still very popular in Holland today. Even in winters, most definitely not their seasons, they're ubiquitous there. When Monet put down yellow here, there was only yellow on the brush. Look here. When he put the green on, there were different colors on the brush, but the colors were not mixed. Pay attention to that. We'll talk about it later. This one is called Springtime Through the Branches. It is really through the branches. So we see that big lumps of bright color impasto are not always how Monet produced his impressions. Let's look at another one. This is yellow iris field in Giverny. Look at the sky and iris. The sizes of these brush strokes are in between those two we just saw. So you see that Monet used varying sizes of these pure, unblended colors. In fact, that's how he modulated different hues or pure colors in his paintings. We'll get to this later. It is the magic that despite the sizes of the brush strokes, our brains work these rough colored lumps into this wonderful iris field under the sun, giving us this noontime impression. let's look at one more before we get to the water lilies. It's called Vétheuil in the Fog. Just when you think that Monet did his business with bright, contrasty colors, right? It's true that he used lighter colors, almost never black, but not always contrasty prime colors. Vétheuil is about 20 kilometers or 15 miles away from Monet's house in Giverny. Yes, water lilies, that's what we're here for. Because many of these paintings were stretched afterwards, it was done with reverence, which means very conservatively. Just look here. Do you see the canvas? If Monet has done the stretching, I'm sure more would have been cut off. Okay, as promised, let's get something out of the way. As a physicist, I'm going to talk a little bit of physics, which hopefully is not a dirty word for you. Actually, I don't know why so many people are annoyed at the first mentioning of the word physics. I think that it is an indictment of our educational system, because for normal minds, curiosity should drive us to ask why and how, right? Someone asked me about color the other day. I thought that I should answer the question here, since at least some of our viewers are not artists by trade and have no plan of ever being one. The question was, if you're not an artist, what should you know about color? I think that at first, the answer should be nothing, so you could focus on enjoying art first. Painters put on certain colors to give viewers certain impressions. As a viewer, the best first step is probably to take the ride, so to speak, and not question why and how. Many people enjoy art throughout their lives without ever understanding color. There is nothing wrong with that. The analogy here is that if you love sushi, why bother figuring out how to make it? Of course, there is something to be said about knowing how, so if the chef, for some reason, does not put enough vinegar in the rice, you know the problem. In other words, I think that the best approach is to wait for your natural curiosity to drive you into it. Before that, here's a brief rundown. The most intuitive basis of analyzing color is the so-called the RYB model, which says that red, yellow, and blue, R, Y, and B, are the prime colors that comprise the rest of the colors. Graphically, people put the prime colors on a wheel in equal distance and fill in the rest of the space with other colors. You can get more elaborate color wheels from the internet. For instance, the color between red and yellow is orange. You can get it by mixing red paint and yellow paint. The color between yellow and blue is green, which you can get by mixing yellow paint and blue paint. The problem with this model is what to put between red and blue. Since mixing red paint and blue paint get you purple, people normally put purple there. It creates a major problem, which is that it leaves no place for magenta, which, as we shall see in a moment, is a color as important as yellow. For artists, that leads to a list of practical problems. The root of the problem is, of course, you cannot connect smoothly the longest wavelength and the shortest. To solve the problem, we adopt the RGB model, which says that the prime colors are red, green, and blue, R, G, and B. The RGB model is fundamentally different from RYB, as it depends on the fact that there are 3 types of sensors in our eyes. They are each sensitive to, you guessed it, red, green, and blue. To put this in another way, when both red and green sensing cells are triggered, the brain reports yellow. Take a look at this grid. Does it look yellow? If it does not, look at it from far away. Or focus your eyes away from the image. Does it look yellow? If still not, what about this image? Look away from it. How about this image? I'm sorry about the greenish look because of the greenish borders that the computer generated automatically. We also see that as the areas of the prime colors decrease, the image becomes less shiny, but the color is easier to recognize. These are the things for the artists to work out. When blue and green cells are triggered, we see cyan. When red and blue are triggered at the same time, as you guessed it, we see magenta, not purple. Now we're consistent. As we have shown, mixing red and green gives you brown. But if you see red and green colors separately, you see yellow. Not the same thing. Therefore, to trigger a strong reaction of the color sensing cells, it is better to feed it pure colors, or the color mixture that does not dull down the stimulation. Those colors are red, green, blue, cyan, magenta, yellow, and of course, white. That's it. Those are the colors that Monet used. That's why his paintings appear shining. In addition, the larger the area of a single color, the brighter the entire area would appear. Does that make sense? If not, you can either forget it or go over it again. Now I don't need to explain why, in nature, there are so many red flowers on green background. With that in mind, let's look at some paintings. This image is a combination of water lilies and the reflection of the trees. Monet put next to each other complementary color pairs, such as purple and green, and blue and orange. By the way, putting complementary colors together is another way to trigger an abnormally strong response, this time directly from the brain. This is the other reason for red flowers on green background. The response for complementary colors could easily become too intense. To reduce the intensity, we see Monet used whitish shades of green and whitish shades of purple. When he used more saturated colors, he typically stayed with one major color tone, without an equally strong complementary color, so our brains would not be overwhelmed. As we see in Monet's paintings, either way works fine. Monet made sure that they are neither too bright nor too dull. As we've said, to give strong stimulation to the color sensing cells, Monet needed large areas of the same color. The eyes only mix such colors together when looking from a distance. Monet learned to squint so he did not have to move back and forth too much to see the effect of his brush strokes. This is the Japanese bridge. You can see that with blank canvas all around. This one is also stretched later. Here's another Japanese bridge. Now the canvas is not even fully covered. we can probably call this one unfinished. In a way, to me at least, these unfinished paintings are just as impressive as Monet's grand affairs in, for instance, Musée de l'Orangerie. This one's called Agapanthus. It's a kind of lily. From these unfinished ones, we can see how Monet formulated his paintings. On top, we see the planning stage. On the right, we see it taking form. And on the left, we see the half-finished product. For an artist, it is really a privilege to see someone's unfinished paintings, as they allow you to see the painting process. It was said that Monet destroyed 500 of his paintings. We're lucky that he did not get to these ones. These paintings that we've shown today are impressive, right? If you agree with me, I can promise you that it is an entirely different experience looking at the real things. If you happen to be around Paris next time, I strongly encourage you to visit the museum. Although it is not a major tourist spot, it is not hard to get to, even if the public transportation workers are on strike. We walked there from the Eiffel Tower. After visiting the museum, we wandered into the public park called Bois de Boulogne, the Wood of Boulogne, right next to it. It is a very nice way to spend the day. With that, I hope this episode is helpful and not too overwhelming. I'll see you next time.